I wrote a piece for Made in Africa, how Donald Trump's foreign policy may impact Africa's economic position. I was speaking with Charles Hecker of Control Risks about Control Risks Risk Map 27, which flagged the Trump administration as the #1 risk in 2017. During that conversation, he congratulated Africa for staying out of Trump's rat-a-tat Twitter feed and by extension below his radar. Popping above Trump's radar has been expensive in almost every case when the president unleashes his Twitter fury. The share price of the affected company drops, in some cases fairly significantly. Nordstrom, however, snapped that trend. As I reflected on Trump's tweets, I recalled an interview with Standard Chartered PLC's Bill Winters, where he said that the bank was wargaming trade disruptions after Donald Trump's election. Clients in our markets are focusing on diversifying trading partners as much as possible to avoid a cliff edge effect if Trump's administration implements protectionist policies, Winters added. I thought to myself, I wonder if Africa is wargaming the effect of a Trump administration on the continent and modeling where the cliff edge effects might be. Africa has barely featured so far. The first African leader to receive a call from President Trump was Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi on the 23rd of January 2017. Then on 13th February, Trump spoke with President Buhari and President Zuma. President Zuma will be glad of that call because he had in fact turned down a request to meet with the presidential candidate Trump in New York. Other than that, the New York Times did report on a series of questions from the Trump transition team to the State Department. On 13th January 2017, the tone was noteworthy, if not just plain skeptical. How does US business compete with other nations in Africa? Are we losing out to the Chinese? Most of AGOA imports are petroleum products with the benefits going to national oil companies. Why do we support that massive benefit to corrupt regimes? The questionnaire asks. With so much corruption in Africa, how much of our funding is stolen? Why should we spend these funds on Africa when we are suffering here in the US? We've been fighting Al-Shabaab for a decade. Why haven't we won? Poses one question. We've been hunting Coney for years. Is it worth the effort? The LRA has never attacked US interests. Why do we care? Is it worth the huge cash outlays? I hear that even the Ugandans are looking to stop searching for him since they no longer view him as a threat. So why do we? Is PEPFAR worth the massive investment when there are so many security concerns in Africa? Is PEPFAR becoming a massive international entitlement program? A strange attitude runs through this. J. Stephen Morrison, director of the Global Health Policy Center at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, said there's a sort of recurrent skepticism that Africa matters to US interests at all. It's entirely negative in orientation. The Trump administration is yet to appoint an Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, whose appointment is the substantive Africa appointment in any US administration. So, where are the risks? Firstly, remittances. Let me start with the executive order protecting the nation from foreign terrorist entry into the United States, dated 6 March 2017. Whilst only flagging 2 African countries, Somalia and Sudan, the executive order speaks to a much more coercive and restrictive immigration policy. It is estimated that a 30 million strong African diaspora remitted nearly $40 billion in 2010, equivalent to 2.6% of Africa's GDP. $40 billion figure is widely viewed to have a major understatement bias because the volume of money that is remitted informally. The number might be 3 times larger than the $40 billion figure. The World Bank estimates that 28% of the $40 billion, which is $11.2 billion, or if you prefer $120 billion, then it becomes an eye-popping $33.6 billion, originates from the US. Whichever way you care to cut it, it's a big and material number. A coercive Trump immigration policy is surely going to taper the absolute remittance figure out of the US into Africa. Africa therefore finds itself at the bleeding edge, not unlike Mexico, a big taper in US remittances bound for Africa as a clear and present danger. AGOA, another risk is around AGOA. It is worth noting that AGOA is solely a US law, and it could conceivably be changed by a simple act of the American Congress. Combined two-way trade between the US and AGOA-eligible sub-Saharan African countries has doubled between 2001 and 2014. Peak trade flows were recorded in 2008, valued at almost $100 billion. Global financial crisis subsequently resulted in a significant contraction in sub-Saharan Africa's exports to the US, although the period since then has initially seen a gradual recovery in trade flows before declining again after 2011. In 2014, two-way trade was worth $50 billion, and eligible AGOA countries' trade surplus with the US had declined to a mere $2 billion. SSA exports to the US have consistently exceeded imports, resulting in a significant trade surplus in favor of African countries overall. However, this surplus has declined and is now very small. Sub-Saharan Africa's largest exporter by value has traditionally been Nigeria, which accounts for 32% in 2013 of combined exports to the US, based on exports from all AGOA beneficiaries in 2013. Angola and South Africa each account for a further 24% of the combined total. A number of countries in the east coast of Africa have sought to leverage textile exports, for example, into the US. A reversal of AGOA would cause serious damage to those businesses. PEPFAR, President Bush is seen as a hero in Africa. In 2003, in a move that has been described as his greatest legacy, Bush created a program called PEPFAR, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. At the time, more than 20 million people in sub-Saharan Africa were living with AIDS, but only 50,000 had access to antiretroviral drugs that manage the disease and prevent its spread. Now, thanks to PEPFAR, 11.5 million people are on those drugs. It has been variously described as a globally transformative lifeline and one of the best government programs in American history. Initially committed $15 billion to PEPFAR over 5 years, but the program was renewed in 2008 and 2013 and has since received over $72 billion in funding. As well as disseminating treatments, money has funded HIV testing, counseling for 75 million people, provided critical care and support to 6 million orphans and vulnerable children, prevented 2 million babies from being born with HIV by offering drugs to mothers, trained 220,000 health workers, supported 11 million voluntary male circumcisions to prevent the spread of HIV, improved healthcare in the various focus countries, supported services for controlling other diseases like malaria and tuberculosis. One study showed that within 5 years, PEPFAR roughly halved the adult death rates in 9 targeted countries. At a time when mortality in other sub-Saharan African nations barely declined. During that period, African adults were 16% less likely to die if they lived in one of the PEPFAR targeted nations. It is estimated that the US has delivered $72 billion of funding over 13 years, which equates to $5.53 billion a year. Any reduction in that spend will have immediate negative effects. US aid to Africa, it is estimated that US aid for all sub-Saharan Africa clocked approximately $8 billion. That's surely going to be cut. FDI, it was surely the second term of President Obama that the penny dropped in Washington about the trade and investment opportunity in Africa. The US corporate sector had preceded President Obama. FDI into Africa clocked $57.5 billion in 2015. A significant slice of that originates out of the US. In fact, when Kenya issued more than $2 billion of Eurobonds, 66% of the issue was bought by US investors. Finally, counter-terrorism. The US seriously ratcheted its military role higher on the continent over the last 10 years. Nick Turse, who writes authoritatively in these matters, says in 2006, just 1% of commandos sent overseas were deployed in the US Africa Command Area of Operations. In 2016, 17.26% of all US Special Operations Forces, Navy SEALs, and Green Berets among them, deployed abroad was sent to Africa, according to data supplied by the Intercept by US Special Operations Command. That total ranks second only to the Greater Middle East, where the US is waging war against enemies in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and Yemen. As recently as 2014, there were reportedly only about 700 US commandos deployed in Africa on any given day. Today, according to Bolduc, there are approximately 1,700 Special Operations Command and Special Operations Forces and enablers deployed at any given time. The team is active in 20 nations in support of 7 major named operations. Using data provided by Special Operations Command and open source information, the Intercept found that US special operators were actually deployed in at least 33 African countries, more than 60% of the 54 countries on the continent in 2016. Early signals, in particular in Yemen, are indicating that the Trump administration is looking at Africa through a security-focused lens. I expect a significant and parabolic move in this regard. I am sure this insertion of a hard power lever was in part designed to be a lever with which to tilt the pitch against China. It's an exponential African arrival. The US and China make interesting neighbors in Djibouti. I concluded by saying Africa is currently growing at a more than 20-year low. These are choppy waters, and for now Africans are sifting smoke signals, trying to work out what Trump might entail exactly.